The reason the Mossad dealt with the negotiations at all is because it is in charge of relations with countries with special relations, countries with which we do not have diplomatic relations, and we have secret ties that eventually ripen into diplomatic relations. See, for example, Jordan, okay?
It must be said, within the Mossad there is a very large department called the Tevel department. These are things that have already been cleared for publication, which is responsible for all the connections that, for reasons of international law, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is forbidden to handle. So some of the things are indeed at a very, very sensitive operational level. Some of the things are more innocent but do not align with various treaties. And in my opinion, this is my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you can or cannot correct me. Some of the business connections of various government companies with entities in Qatar were actually conducted through the Tevel department in the Mossad. And because there were extensive connections between the Mossad and the government of Qatar, and the sovereign rule there, let's put it this way, you talked about ethical principles. It doesn't seem reasonable that the state of Israel would carry out a combat operation and a military action on the soil of a country with which the Mossad maintains such extensive ties.
Correct. Now, if you ask me if, in my assessment, the Mossad was involved, then indirectly with providing intelligence, but because it wasn't involved, in my opinion, and because he is the expert, the content expert, let's call it assassinations abroad. There was no one on the ground who could see with their own eyes, and gives the green light and even presses a button. And you remember, Ziv, operations from the past. If it's the assassination of Ali Hassan Salame, a Mossad operative sat and watched from the window of her rented apartment and pressed 2 buttons on the radio device and carried it out. So
that's regarding the mishaps. But you can think of Lillehammer, you can think of Mabhou. Meaning, it's not that boots on the ground solve all the problems, but you've told me something new, that there was no Mossad man actually there. That's an interesting point. Can I understand from you that what you're saying is that the fact that the Mossad withdrew its hand from the event is to some extent responsible for the failure of this operation?
Correct. But when you say failure, Ziv, I argue that the very fact of our bombing in Qatar is the very fact that we crossed the psychological barrier to do it, and the fact that the Hamas leaders, who are indulging in vast sums of money, stealing funds, and making sure to buy real estate for their children in Europe and give them a Western education, knew that their Garden of Eden in Qatar was over. From my perspective, that is a success. By the way, you could also ask, was the Mabhou assassination a success because they photographed nearly 15 operatives and published their pictures? The bottom line is we eliminated the scoundrel and managed to get out.